Hi everybody, this is Kate Fogger and with me as always is Julie Hurt. We are two humans being and we are making light. So Julie and I have been talking, we always do this, we always end up chatting before we start and getting all the good stuff out and then we go, we haven't started recording. So now we're a bit flustered because we know what we want to talk about. I'm not going to name it because I think the name will fall out during the day, during the conversation, but it's in summary, she says, not summarizing at all, how we panic, react, drop things when somebody else requires our help. So there is a phrase, lack of planning on your part does not constitute my emergency, and everybody's seen a variation of that. That probably sums it up, but also not just in a work environment, but in a life environment in general, how we take ownership of other people's problems and how that makes us feel. And we've just in our chatting, we've come across so many situations around that we thought it's worthy of more discussion. So Julie, would you like to start?
So we were talking about I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, like my plate overfloweth or cup overfloweth, whatever, anyway, I got a lot on my plate right now. And to some degree, some of it's self-induced because I've been asking the universe for some help on some certain things. They're dealing with financials actually, and I'm getting a lot of, I also can do freelance marketing. So I've been doing a lot of freelance marketing gigs and I love them. And then just when I think, oh, look, here's another one and I'll take this project, then something that's been well over a year in the works just landed on my plate last night. And I was saying to Kate, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get all this done. And then she reminded me, well, just because they, waited a year doesn't mean like you drop everything and jump on it. Good point, which is why we're here. And so then we were talking a little bit about, so there is that, and there's just like, I am one person. I'm working on being present in everything that I do and being mindful about what I'm working on in the moment. But the other thing then we started talking about was these little bad boys, these phone things, and how it's just like, if you have the desire or the need or the negative belief about yourself that creates the workaround, which we can explain, that you have to help everybody when they need the help, which is, I think we're both susceptible to that, where we feel, I think because we are working with our intuitive abilities, everybody has intuitive abilities, but because we're focusing on our intuitive abilities, we tend to be more empathetic. And so when we see somebody needs something, oh, I'll stop doing what I'm doing and I'll help you. And that's a thing that we are constantly working with, because if we don't drop everything to help somebody else, and here's where it becomes a workaround, then if I don't do that, then I'm going to continue to believe that I'm either not good enough, not worthy, not safe, secure, protected, or not lovable. And so we create that, oh, got to drop everything in an effort to not feel that. And so now we're coming to terms with, we can't drop everything for somebody else because that problem wasn't created by us. We're not necessarily the ones to solve it, but it leaves a big, like right now, as I say that, it leaves kind of like a in my abdomen, like, oh gosh, like how am I gonna tell somebody I can't work on their stuff now? How can I not tell? I gotta tell everybody I can do everything. I can help you everybody. And because I can't physically, mentally, I can't, but yeah, that was a lot. Did that make any sense, Kate?
It did. And I was trying to write down at the same time because that raised so many ding, 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 ding flags for me. The first one, though, I will say, because it might make you feel better, is, okay, so we recognize, you and I, basically, this is something I used to think of as, we think we're sort of, when we learn to accept our sensitivity and we're taught eventually to accept it and accept that it's a gift, and it is a gift, it's a huge gift because it allows us to do what we do, but there is a level of carelessness on our part in that we allow other people's feelings to be the priority. And that the way that changed my thinking about that was what Nick Bro said about that it's actually your discomfort with them being uncomfortable that's making you do it. You're not doing it because you're a good person. So you and I are driven by not good enough and trying to help, but there's a slightly narcissistic bent on it which actually helps me deal with it, because suddenly it's like I'm not, oh, poor Kate, overwhelmed. I'm like, Kate, you need to get your shit together, because this is not your problem and you're making it. Like, I am being slightly narcissistic in that I can't bear their discomfort, so I have to do whatever I can to make them feel better. And when you realize that behavior is actually about satisfying your inability to watch someone else's discomfort, I find it a lot easier to deal with, as opposed to being overwhelmed by it. It's like, this is your problem, Kate. Your problem is that you can't sit with other people's discomfort. That's probably not helpful to you right now, but
no, that is. Thank you, but keep going.
In the corporate world, as I know you're used to it, it's almost like there's so much in the corporate world is about now, and quite often it isn't now. But what they mean is, I need your assurance that this is your top priority, and then they'll bugger off into the reeds for a year or whatever until it suits them. But they expect it to be your top priority. But actually, they don't expect it to be your top priority. As I went through my corporate life, I realized that a lot of people at a very superficial level are just going, aha, yes, on it, done, tick, 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 because they are appeasing. Appeasing is the wrong word, because obviously it's a working culture and a relationship, but you're giving somebody what they need in saying, yes, this is important, yes, I'm on it, yes, this is a priority, yes, I take you very seriously, I hear what you have to say. But they're not literally meaning, I'm going to drop everything and get onto this. Whereas simple souls like me think, if someone says I have to do it now, or that it's important, I don't have that level of veneer on me that goes, aha, yes, I'll get right on it, knowing full well I'll schedule it behind 3 other things because that's what I've got on my plate. I have this, I had coaching, I think I mentioned this last time, that my boss, I was going to, no, I won't name either his name or his title that I had for him, but he had me coached by one of the really senior managers, and again, and I was like, well, that's not me. I don't want to be like you, actually. And that is, it's like a lot of people who demand attention and demand action have a built-in understanding that it's not today, because they know how the business works. They are just making sure that they are fighting their corner for their bit of business, for their department, by making it ultra important. It's like when we work with software development, and then you have defect raising where people say this doesn't work, or that doesn't work, or this is a problem, or that, and you always had to rank it from like in severity, from like urgent to nobody ever says their problem is because everybody, you know. And eventually the team that were working on it came back and said, we are not going to actually work on anything that you mark as severe, because everyone was just going severe, life-threatening. It's a human nature when you're in that to say. So when people say, I want this done immediately, they don't necessarily expect you to do it immediately. What they mean is, I don't want you to forget about this. I need some reassurance from you that this is important. And yet people like me take it as, oh, if I don't do it today, then I've let them down. Yeah. So there's a level of, I would call it corporate intelligence in understanding the urgency of things. And, you know, if in doubt, I used to go back to people and say, okay, it'll be a week or something like that. Now, if they throw the toys out their pram at that case, and I go, oh, okay, maybe it is urgent. But a lot of people mean, I've got it off my plate. Now it's your problem. If it's not done in 6 months, I might remember. Yeah. You know, that was a lot as well. This is hot topic for us.
Yeah, no, you're making me think of my last boss, and like when you said being like you were coached so that you could maybe be more like your boss, and I was constantly coached by my boss to be like her, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And so her urgent, she would come in and do all this. She was very reactionary, in my humble opinion, she was very reactionary to everything in the marketplace, instead of being strategically looking at where we needed to go and leading in that regard. And that's all me judging, because that's all me going, well,
you could have done better.
Well, personally, yeah. Personally, yeah. And I had a lot of team members, people that worked for me, who believed the same thing. But anyway, that's a wander to the bridge. I wasn't supposed to do that anyway. But But I just remember like being really resistant to anytime she would come into my office and say I needed to do something now, I would do this, because I mean, not literally in front of her face, but I would, but in a way that she actually got really mad at me. Doesn't matter, long story under the bridge. Anyway.
That's because, Julie, whether or not you did this, everything in your energy went.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, she knew it. She called me on it all the time, which then just made it worse. But which is so funny that it just, when I look back at it, I just kind of laugh at my own energy, my own stubbornness, my own attitude, kind of thing. That type of stuff, as well as like that all of that she is as well. And I do have a lot of compassion and cut her some grace now too, now that I've seen a lot of different things. Like, I'm not going to hold a grudge. It's an interesting chapter in the story. Anyway, I do remember though that her stuff would always, she'd come in on fire. She would come in on fire. I had to do da 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 da, and I'd be like, yeah, whatever, and I wouldn't do anything, and she'd forget about it. So
I learned that I learned so much. The guy used to sit next to me, Craig. Oh, Craig, if you're watching, don't think he will be, but you know, and we always just say, be more Craig, because Craig would just nod and whatever, just let them just management. Oh, fucking everything's wrong. Like, and like they were putting pressure on us for timelines and stuff like that. And like they were saying, oh, you know, well, we'll need it in 6 months. And he'd go, well, it'll be at least a year. And I'll say, well, we need it in 6 months. And he'll go, well, it'll be at least a year. And they'd go, but we need it in 6 months. And he'd go, well, it will be at least a year. And then he just would not budge. And then as he left the meeting, I was like, how do you? Because the rest of us would just cave. And he'd go, well, I think it'll be 6 months, but it'll be a year. It just didn't, it was like water off a duck's back. He just didn't react. Whereas all the rest of us would be like, oh my God, this is my fault somehow. And you're like, how is it your fault? But it would, you know, in that sinking feeling that you get, like that you've arrived at school with no underpants on or something like that. And you're like, how are we going to make this work? The whole world's going to end because they need it in 6 months. They never needed it in 6 months. They never needed it in 6 months. You could do it in 6 months and the marketing team would be like, what, that? Oh yeah, we didn't think you'd take us seriously. We didn't think you'd have time. Sorry, marketing, but that's how it was.
No, you're not a fan. No, I totally, yeah. It's interesting. It's so funny. Because if you watch like any of the situational comedies or any type of television show, it's all, or watch, is it Dilbert, I think was the cartoon, like
yes,
life, right? Like we all make these demands of other people. Every party knows that these are not even possible, true, authentic, nothing. And it's this whole entire game of silliness. It really is. Like, why do we do this? And it, like my guides were saying as we started this conversation too, it's really about trust. Like I think even before we started the episode and we were talking about this and this particular situation that I have, it's more about trust. Like I should, one, trust myself that I will do the best work I can, but I have to, and not but, because but negates everything you said prior to the but. And I have to allow myself the time to do it properly. Speed, quality, price is this equation that my husband and I use because we're both in advertising, and you can only pick two. You can only pick speed and quality, but you can't pick price. Or you pick price and quality, then you can't pick speed. Like there's only two of those. Anyway, so I have to give myself time to do it. But at the same and at the same time, my guides would go trust. I need to trust my client who has been a longtime friend that she will understand. She's really asking, when can you fit us in your schedule?
Yes, I was going to say that. She's not said, Julie, you have to do this by the end of the week. She has said, probably with, I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to get back to you.
Yeah. She even acknowledged
she knows it's been a year.
Yeah. Since she did the part that I gave her the assignment to do the work she needed to do in order for me to be able to do my work.
She takes a year and yet you're kicking yourself because you're not going to be able to do your bit within a week. It's nonsense, isn't it? I bet she's not going through this.
No.
We are a special type of
because
person.
I love her. She might be in her own because I love her and she does things like that too, but that's not the point.
But there's you know, it's like I like the analogy of the simple soul, actually, because I always like to think of myself as a sweet, pure little engineer with all this management shite that was shoved on top of me. Whereas engineers are all about trying to do the right job, trying to do a good job, trying to do it well, blah, 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 blah. There's no blarney, there's none of this nonsense. And then the level above are all come up with all the, you know, nonsense of that. But that's just it. The expectation of someone who comes back to you after a year is not that you're going to drop everything, but you've already built that into your response. It's like you've let them down. You haven't even opened your email and you've already let them down. It's just stupid.
I know.
What I find fascinating is, because I'm out of it now, I was going to say something else there as well. Oh, the one trick I learned, in for anyone who is in project management out there, I learned two things. One is always put a dollar value on anything, whatever it is. Don't ask for anything unless you can put a dollar value on it. If something's going to cost something, work out, and it doesn't matter how vague your assumptions are, get some assumptions down, put a dollar value and say, well, okay, yes, sir, we can do this, but this is what it's going to cost. Now that cost can be, it's going to be 300 man years, or we're going to lose X, Y, Z. But if you put a price on it, you'll not get an argument. You just make that price so high that they don't want it anymore. But rather than saying no, which is our automatic can't, you go, Craig would have just gone, okay, we'll look into that. And then you go away, you make whatever assumptions you need to make the sums work. And you can make wild assumptions. They're still better than nothing. You've got to draw a line in the sand. And you can go, yes, so we can do that next week, but it'll cost you £3 million. Then it's them saying, you know, it's like turning it around. There was something else that pinged for me. The other thing is when someone comes up and goes, I need it immediately, I need it now. Whereas before I'd go, oh my God, now I have to die because I can't possibly do this. I would just take breath and I go, that's fine then. So you want me to stop working on X, Y, and Z? And then they'd go, oh, no, actually, no, stay on X. Like, I haven't made the decision. All I've done is, absolutely, I am here to worship you and do whatever you want. But you need to understand, I can happily do this, because I found as soon as I push it, because like you, I had a lot of this going on.
Yeah.
And as soon as you do that, they then they don't even know they're doing it. They're then reacting to that. And then they're angry. Why aren't you doing what I've asked? Or are you not respecting me and all that? And actually what you're saying is, I'm fucking overwhelmed. I can't do this. So just push it back to them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can do this straight away. Let me get on to that. But I dropped this. That's not a good one. Oh God, see that? Oh, I don't miss that, Julie. I don't miss that at all.
I don't miss it at all. I don't miss any of that at all. I don't miss the, so, okay, side note, so maybe tangent. There's a show, you all have, you have HBO. I mean, you might not subscribe to it, but you guys can, you in England, Scotland can get to HBO, right? If you want.
I think so, yes.
Okay, I thought so. I thought it was like a global thing. Anyway, there's a show on there called The Gilded Age, which is done by Julian Fellows, a Brit, and he did Downton Abbey. You're familiar with Downton Abbey, right? Okay. So anyway, so it's this new show, but it's about in New York City in the Gilded Age, clearly. So it's pre-World War I. It's probably post-Civil War. I don't know the time, but it's like late 1800s, I think. I don't know. I'm not good with my history. Anywho, I can just tell you by the fashion, like when it is. It kind of. Anyway, but it's about in New York City when you had the old money and then you had new money. So you had the Rockefellers, JP Morgan, Carnegie, anybody that came to America, amassed a fortune, that's new money. Anybody that brought their fortunes with them, that's old money. Anyway, so there's this whole, I'll say war, but it's this very polite, right beneath the surface, you're accepted because you're old money, you're not accepted because you're new money. But it's all these polite little things they had to do, and then they still weren't accepted. But all of it's just like all of the amount of crap you had to have, like as far as dress, oh my God, the dresses are amazing. And you had all these dresses and like, I can't even think how you wash them. Like, how do you wash like all these silks? I just don't get it. Anyway, I'm digressing.
They probably didn't.
No, I know. Anyway. Anyway.
You just had a sponge bath and that was it.
I guess so. Oh, any hoozle, but it's just all that. But it's interesting to me. And when I watch it, I'm totally into this show. I love it. Because all of the things that, all the hoops somebody had to go through in order to be accepted, in order to be included, in order to play along with the game. And I'm like, what is even the point of the game? And that also feels very much like corporate America, as well as then also this little bit that we're talking about of just putting other people's problems on our own. Because that's really what was happening then too. Just because somebody amassed a fortune on their own in their own lifetime, then they're not deemed worthy, but they have to do all these other things so that they can be deemed worthy by somebody else.
That actually is an analogy for what we do to ourselves all the time. Like just by living and existing, we, the new rich, are trying to justify our existence and prove our worth and all.
In an old system.
People are awful.
Yeah. You know, you just made me think, you had nouveau rich, right? Trying to prove their existence in an old system, which is exactly what's happening now.
Only hit the old system. Yes, I suppose, because in our analogy, the old system is just the people that came before us. Right. And they all fucked up, and they were fucked up by their parents, who were fucked up by their parents. This book, I can't remember which book it is. I think it's like, There's Nothing Wrong with You, another of those books. But it said, you know, is it any wonder that we grow up? I mean, you and I do through the soul coaching, something happens as a child, you make that about yourself, whatever. But also, you know, beyond that, every single bit of our education, and I mean education about life, not just at school, is about, you need to do it this way. If you don't do it this way, then it means you don't respect me, or it means you're a bad person, or, you know, don't eat that because it's bad for you, and don't do it that way, and these are the rules, and you have to be polite, and you know, all of it is instruction that tells you that's actually, instead of, you know, nobody just says, you know, well, you should handle things this way because it's nicer, people get on better if we do it this way. It's all about, do it this way, otherwise you're bad, do it this way and I won't love you, or I don't respect you. Or generally as a child, I knew full well that my mother did not like me. I knew she loved me because that was in the rules, but she didn't like me very much, you know. And that was all, you know, because if I behaved in a certain way, that was not agreeable to her. And that's it. But it's like, is it any wonder that we all got completely fucked up? To even think now, imagine you saying to your child, do whatever you like, darling, but it's nice for you to consider how other people feel about it. Nobody would allow that to happen. No. And yet that actually is how it should be. Mm-hmm. That you model with yourself about how being nice is great. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to sacrifice yourself. You don't have to do things because it's what other people want you to do. And that's our whole society is based on obedience and fitting some random criteria that actually doesn't stand up under scrutiny. No. I'm on a rant.
Right. And well, I'm thinking back to previous episodes, like we've talked about, to some degree, we've kind of talked about or talked around patriarchy, which is, I'm not trying to put down men, that's not the point, but it's this whole system. Toxic masculinity, not men, but right. Okay. But that's the whole system that's in Western civilization. That's the whole system that's at play right now and is being really examined. So there's that. But the other thing is, like, we also had the conversation about God. And we read a book called I Am, I Create, which was a woman channeling the divine. Of Course in Miracles is also channeling the divine. But that's not what the divine or God would ever have wanted. The system that's in place, this patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, was created by humans. It wasn't created by God. God just wants everybody to get along and like see the light that everybody has. And when we do that, like, to me, if I think of it just in terms of like today, like our system today, if I see everybody as the light that they are, things feel so much more expansive. Like, think of all the, you know, like I say, everybody has a piece of pie. Like, you and I have different perspectives on things, but we have a broader perspective when we're together. And that's the part is like, that's the part that to me is mind blowing.
The fundamental difference, I think, is that Humans say, you are not like me, I need you to be like this so that I can approve of you, as opposed to going, now, isn't that interesting how you do it differently? Like putting aside right, wrong, good, bad, rich, poor, all of that, just like, isn't that interesting? Here is somebody who, for all intents and purposes, is exactly the same for me as me, apart from their experiences. Isn't it amazing how two people can be so different, you know, and not seeing it as a challenge against us. I'm desperate to get this book. Hang on a second. It was the language of, it's just a mother talking to a child, and none of it was outrageous, and none of it was like call the child services or anything like that, but it was all one big put down. Basically, you have to work hard, you have to do it this way, you've got to do well at school. If you don't do that, nobody's going to, I'm only telling you these things so that you grow up right, because if you don't grow up right, you're going to end up unemployed and everybody will hate you and you won't have any, you know. And it's a constant stream of, you have to perform this way, and if you don't perform this way, then you're of no value. In fact, you're worse than valueless, you know, you're worse than worthless, because you're actually going to bring the whole society down with, you know. It's really,
yeah, no, because the other thing that's coming to mind is like that, if we had more grace with one another, meaning if we saw the light in one another, I'm touching my dog's head and I didn't mean to, I'm accidentally kicking my dog. If we had more grace with one another, the expansion that would take place. And then, and even first, if we gave ourselves that grace. Mm-hmm. If I believe, look, there's only so much time in the day, I need to take care of myself first, or I need to put the oxygen mask on myself first, or I can't do anything for anybody. And in that, that's okay. It's okay to be who I am and what I need. And then say to somebody, you know, like this client that's come back after a year, which is lovely. I'm so grateful that they're there. Great, so glad you're here. I need to finish up la 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 la, and then I will get to you. Here's this potential time frame, and that will be fine. That will be fine. But even just the moment of me giving myself grace just takes the pressure off. But even that, like, that's so hard. That's a good first step, and that is a big first step. And it's
but see, when you said that, like when you actually see that email written out, it feels fine, doesn't it? She's not gonna, nobody's gonna be upset by that. So you've just had a whole woo. I see this now, it's so easy to step away with, like Gary's the same with his work. He's like, oh, they want me to do this. And I'm like, it's not your problem, darling. You know, it's so easy when you're not in it. I'm like, you can't. You're already committed to other things. This is not your problem. All you have to do is go back to your boss and say, I either do this, I do this, but you know, and when someone's in that, you know, I know because I was in it for years, where you just can't see out. But the other thing about the differences, what occurred to me when you were saying that about us sort of needing people to be different. This isn't about being a good person. Everybody thinks that, you know, this preaching spirituality and all of that is about being a good person. It's not. It's about being a happy person. If you can look at somebody else and go, that's brilliant, they're different, even if you don't approve, even if you don't like, or you don't have to accept, you don't have to believe them, you don't have to agree, but the point is, if you can just coexist with them without it offending you, you're going to be a happier person. This is not about right and wrong. This is about saying, I don't see it that way, but that's okay, because you don't get upset then. This is, you know, we get so hung up on right and wrong and pushing for justice or whatever, and it's like, it's not about that. It's actually about being happy. Or, you know, a good starting point is not to be miserable, even if you can't reach happiness. If you stop worrying about having to correct people or change them or educate them and just go whatever. This story comes to mind. Anyone who drinks alcohol might relate to this. I had a friend at university, at work when I started, and I always drank a lot as a young person. That's fine. I didn't consider myself a rowdy drunk or anything like that. I handled my drink extremely well, I feel. I had a lot of friends, not a lot of friends who didn't. I knew a lot of people who didn't, and especially like with work would go out, and then partners would be there, and quite often there were people you didn't know that well, and then usually the women, if I'm honest, would drink too much and make a complete ass of themselves. I loved them for that, because it just made them human, you know. It was like, you know, and then there's a bit of superiority, because obviously I don't get like that. But I remember in one of them, and it was actually one of my bosses, for all his faults, he threw a really good party, and this guy's wife just went like completely, he just went off the wall. Can't even remember what it was, whether she picked a fight with somebody or just got really tearful. I can't remember. I mean, you know, and it's funny. And the next day when I saw the gentleman whose wife it was, he was not the slightest bit apologetic or anything. And I remember thinking, he made some comment like, Joanne will be Joanne, or what, it wasn't Joanne, but, and I remember, you know, first of all, I was gobsmacked, because had it been me, I would have been mortified. I would have taken all that shame, and I would have carried it around to a far greater degree than anyone. Everyone else was a bit pissed anyway. They probably didn't even remember, you know, and everyone else is just like, it happened. She wasn't, you know, she didn't kill anyone, or she wasn't particularly offensive. She just was a bit of a mess. But he just shrugged it off. And then I thought, how wonderful to not feel that responsibility, because your partner is a grown-up. I have no doubt she's feeling like shit, but, you know, well done you for not, it was just like, that's who she is, no judgment. And that was a real shock to me, because, you know, had it been me, I would have expected my partner to have, you know, slagged me off day in, day out for a year after that.
Yeah. And I
That's
realized
a very bad example, but it proves the point.
Yeah, I realized I've done that to Brad too. Like, I'm more worried about how particularly when he's had too much to drink, how much people are judging him, and
but none of them are judging you,
right? Ultimately me, right? And that yeah, wow. And it's his birthday today, so I'm gonna have to apologize.
So you can let him get really drunk and promise never to slag him off about it.
Well, that I don't necessarily want them to do, but
no, it's funny, isn't it? Alcohol, because I don't drink at all. Like Gary doesn't drink now either. And actually, we've got a work reunion from a long time ago. And I just, if you don't drink, what's the point? They're not people I really want to see necessarily. I don't really know. Like in the olden days, you'd be like, oh, go out for a drink, that'll be interesting. And that's like,
yeah,
maybe if I had a guest list.
Another thing, every now and then a cocktail, but that's another topic. So yeah. Anyway, is there something else I wanted to trust? I don't remember. I thought there was something else. When you were looking for your book, there was something else I was going to say.
There is a lot of trust in it, because it's about trusting yourself, but it's also allowing other people to trust you, because it's almost like if you react that quickly, you don't have any faith in their trust in you, as it were, because it's almost like you have to immediately react, as opposed to them go, I know from, and you'll have this from work, that people, if you met anybody who knew you at your work, they'd have said, well, I would know, I would have known you would have done it. Like, they wouldn't have been worried about when you could get to it, because they knew you.
Yeah, there's a vulnerability in that, and that's hard to get to. Yeah. Do I feel much better about managing my workload, if you will, and like managing like client expectations?
Yeah, and that's just it. Who is it? It's Gary Van Warmerdine talks about all relationships and how many parties are involved. So there's you, and there's your client, then there's your perception of your client, that's 3 characters, then there's your client's perception of you, that's 4 characters, then there's your reaction. It sort of almost becomes recursive, and this, so you've formed an opinion of how you think your client is going to react. You then have formed an opinion of how you think your client is going to react to your opinion. Do you know what I mean? And it then becomes, it's like crazy mirrors, and you suddenly realize it doesn't take much for there to be a real, not conflict, but lack of cohesiveness and communication, because you're talking through so many different layers. When the facts are, you're busy, it might take you a couple of weeks to get to it. When you put it like that, it's like, well, what's all the fuss about?
Yeah, Wow,
It's
just
your,
like when you illustrated it that way, like all I just saw was like this big ball of like yarn that's all like intricately, and it's just this big mess instead of just saying. And I've always tried to, I don't like that mess, like the Gilded Age, that show, like to see all that, it's like, oh my God, that just takes like my sister, I love my sister. She's a large house. And I'm just like, how do you clean that? I can't clean that. Like, I like small things. And I just realized it's just kind of interesting that, you know, I would much rather have a smaller house that I can maintain instead of a larger house. She's got a bigger family though. It doesn't matter any hoozle. It's just like that intricacy or that all that stuff. Like, I'd much rather just say, you know, thank you. I'm grateful for your email. I'm so happy we're going to work together again. I'll be able to get to it at this point in time. Just being honest. That honesty is like, ooh, that it just feels hard because it's that vulnerability and it's the trust. It's all of it. Oh,
see, my natural inclination is to be completely brutally honest, but I've got in trouble for that before, as we all do. And then you start to hide. I haven't hidden it, but there's a bit of me that I'm always, again, back to the old innocent naivety. I can lie. I can lie very effectively if I need to, but it's just something I don't do. I've never ever done it unless it's, you know, absolutely. And the reason I say I can lie is like, if you ever put me in a hole and I had to lie, I could. I'm not that naive, but it just would never occur to me. It just wouldn't, and that's part of the reason. And then people who are coming from a perspective of that they do have all this stuff in front of you, when they see your honesty, sometimes they then layer their own expectations on top of that. You know, this is like the sort of game you play about how long is it going to take, and I say 2 weeks and they think, well, she doesn't mean 2 weeks, she's sandbagging a month. You know, like they are putting their behaviors on me, and that's when you also get a disconnect. We get a lot of that with timescales as well. It's like, no, I mean 2 weeks. I am not, because they would exaggerate what they needed, and then I would give them an honest answer, and then do you know what I mean? It's like you're talking at two completely different languages, whereas I'm going, no, this is what I mean. Whereas you're going, yeah, but you said this, but what you really mean is this.
mm-hmm.
Like, no. Yeah, I think there's a naivety in that as well, which I would gladly hold on to. Thank you.
Yeah,
because it has served me well in a lot of other ways in any sort of confrontation or conflict.
mm-hmm.
And actually, I've got another book up there called is Nonviolent Communication. I find it really hard to do, as in my friend would have to write it down for me if I was in a conflict with somebody, because I find it really hard to back down on certain things. But nonviolent communication is all about just literally stating the facts and taking all the other emotion out of it, and it's a lot harder than you think, but it's very effective.
Yeah, it reminds me of active listening, which I'm a huge fan of. And it's a skill. It might be an art too, but there's definitely a skill to active listen. But when I learned it through my corporate life, like all the training and whatnot, I just thought it was fantastic, because you really listen to somebody, really listen to them, and then repeat back to them what you heard. And I would do it too, like, even I heard all of this, and you could really get to what the crux of what they were really saying, which to some degree, many times, was actually a personal pain point. It wasn't so much the issue or the problem or the deadline. It was how they felt, how it was making them feel about it. And then when you acknowledge, I hear you say this, and I hear, like, because you say, I hear you say, and you can repeat back what they said. And I would also sometimes, depending on if I had a good relationship with the person, particularly if they worked for me, I hear you say this, and it feels like you're angry or it's upsetting you or whatever, and here, and then try to diffuse that. And in that, then we could together get to the solution to the problem. But yeah, that's it,
because we're all just trying to be heard, aren't we, really? You know, humans at some level are really quite simple. It's all the other shit that goes on that makes it complicated. We all need to feel loved and appreciated and safe.
Yeah. Well, thank you once again for joining us for this week's episode of Making Light Two Humans Being. I'm Julie Hiert, and with me, as always, is Kate Foggo. And today, as you just heard, we were talking about how one person's request, someone's request, triggered negative beliefs in me. And then we talked about it with Kate, and just all the things that, oh my gosh, if we just breathe for just a second and realize that everybody's just asking a question, you'd be in a really good spot. So not that we solved today's world's problems, but we at least figured out how for me to write an email back to my client, and that is a good thing. So join us next week when we talk about something completely different. You can follow us here on YouTube. You can hit the subscribe button and also hit that little bell, and you'll be notified when there's a new episode. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And as Kate is demonstrating, all the links are in the show notes below. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, and if you have any ideas for future topics, please let us know. We would very much love to hear from you. Again, I'm Julie, that's Kate, and we will see you next week.